Hello and welcome to the AgriHQ Livestock Insight Report Update, brought to you by the AgriHQ analysts. I'm Sarah Friel.
And I'm Nicola.
And we'll be taking you through the North Island and South Island Livestock Insight Reports from last week. So, Nicola, do you want to tell us a little bit about the China and New Zealand FTA agreement that we touched on?
I'd love to. So we've got the New Zealand updates its free trade agreement with China, which sounds exciting, and it is, to be fair. But the direct impacts on sheep and beef exports into China, we can't really find anything there to report on. But there are, it is a maturing of this relationship, and we are seeing some better shipping arrangements, or at least documentation for other chilled products like seafood. So perhaps we're a little less in competition with those channels. Also on the front page, we've got the weather situation. So fill us in on what's happening in the North Island, Sarah.
Sure. So in the North Island, we are seeing an extending of those dry conditions. Most regions are a lot drier than they were 2 weeks ago now, just because we've not had a lot of rain. However, rural weather is suggesting that we've got a subtropical force kind of hanging over the North Island now. And if our high pressure abates, we could see a bit of rainfall scattered throughout the week. So fingers crossed.
Awesome. And the South Island, it's much of a similar thing. Everyone's pretty comfortable, apart from like Banks Peninsula and parts of northern coastal Canterbury. Certainly Clutha and Southland are happy for having some extra dry weather. But, the ground's drying out. We're returning to usual soil moisture levels for February. Things are slowing down. So there is a touch of caution coming in. I just want to quickly break to plug that we recorded an AgriHQ Q&A weather podcast. So you can catch up more on weather there. If I switch over to what's happening in the cattle page, things are pretty steady with the cattle side of things despite a lifting US market. We're seeing good supply of South Island prime cattle, but there's enough procurement pressure there for us to think that to lift the AgriHQ indicator for this week. So we'll see if that plays out. But the downside there, or the thing to watch there, before we get too excited, is that the shipping situation is showing signs of deteriorating to our global markets. So there's definitely something that a risk that processors are managing. We'll keep further eye on that. Is there specific things in the North Island we should know about, Sarah?
It really is just sharing those commonalities with the South Island, with the shipping deteriorating, capping too much upside at the farm gate, and the US market taking off. But again, it's capped, so can't have too much of an impact, sadly. We are expecting about an extra 5 cents at the farm gate for bull this week, so we'll see if that comes to fruition. And this week we will be taking a bit of a closer look at the cow price and where that should be relative to the 90 CL price.
Yeah, and that dairy cow, the dairy cow side of things, it really influences what happens in the next 6 to 8 weeks across the cattle space. So definitely something we need to keep an eye on. And the store cattle side of things, I think it's safe to say there's probably not much happening in either island.
Yeah, fairly inactive in the North Island. If anyone is offloading, it's those more northern regions, but otherwise everyone's pretty happy to sit still. They've still got some depth to feed, so there's no massive pressure to offload yet, especially not onto a cooler market.
Yes, yeah, and similar here, like buyers are looking for those straight beef cattle, but they're not really available. We've got some cattle fairs in March and the beef weaners coming forward, so that'll be when people more or less have to wait for that stock. If we look onto the lamb side of things, it might be too early to call it, but I think that the lamb slaughter value has probably reached its low tide mark. We've still got some talk around there about processors taking the price lower, but supply really isn't in their favour, I would say, and we are seeing people start to step out at the prime sale yards and at the top end of the schedules. So no real movement on paper for schedules. In fact, some schedules have come down, but the proper buying range. It is holding pretty steady, and I would say showing some upward potential.
Bold claims, but I'd say pretty similar signs in the North Island. Speaking to processors and agents alike, more people are securing those higher end prices rather than the tail end of our range. So, that indicates that processors are prepared to offer a bit better at the farm gate to secure stock. So yeah, we could be at the low tide mark or just stepping away from it now.
The store lamb side of things, I touched on there's some caution coming into the market, but prices are holding pretty steady. We're still really pretty strong relative to our slaughter values. It's giving people some pause to thought about whether or not they want to enter that market and what their options might be.
Yeah, in the North Island, when you're looking at the dollar per kg, we saw a bit of a step back, a bit of downside compared to last week, where it's been kind of on and off with lambs in the North Island. People are either buying them like crazy or they're not interested at all. So this week it definitely cooled down a little bit, but in saying that, we're seeing some really heavy weights. Lambs are coming onto the market at around like 40 kgs now, so I think people are focusing more on a per head price, and that's deflating the dollar per kg price.
That makes sense. And we'll do a little bit of a look in this coming report around what the advanced lamb kill means for store lamb availability and what how our weather predictions might fall into that. What do we need to talk about for the export market, Sarah?
The export markets, this in last week's report was all about lamb and venison. So on the lamb side of things, we saw some decline in chilled lamb average export value, but we saw some really strong volumes still, and that was in that October to December period where, it's kind of what we expected because all of those major destinations went back into lockdown. So kind of makes sense that the appetite for chilled lamb would decrease a little bit. And we're coming to the end of our chilled production now. One company said about midweek this week that'll end, but those exporters will be pushing chilled lamb a little bit harder from now until April to capitalise on that Easter market. So we'll see what price does then. On the venison side of things, anyone who has been tracking that market won't be surprised to hear that there's been, some pretty severe moves on the farm gate side of things, and that's all down to the export market. It is, a pretty valuable cut normally, but given that the restaurant trade overseas just hasn't been what it was, we've seen the chilled and frozen average export values decline, and people have a bigger appetite for the frozen cuts just because they can store them a bit more, a little bit cheaper, a bit less of a gamble, and that is having an impact. But the industry overall is showing a bit of optimism and a bit of resilience when you look at the velvet and the trophy stag sales recently.
Excellent. So look out for us in your inbox on Friday if you're a subscriber. If you're not a subscriber, head along to agrihq.co.nz, get yourself sorted out.